She joked that I was sulking, mocked me, in front of people I'd known longer than she had. Her voice had that familiar note of smugness when she leaned back on the patio chair, swirling her wine, and tossed it out like it was some brilliant punchline. He's sulking again. Probably because I out-earned him this quarter. Everyone laughed. I didn't. I looked at her for exactly 3 seconds. No expression. Just studied her face like I was seeing it for the first time, and then stood up, walked down the porch steps, and didn't say a single word. Not one of them followed me. Why would they? The joke had landed. Their laughter was still echoing through the sliding glass door as I got into my car. I didn't drive off in a fury or slam the door. I drove slow, deliberate, calm enough to stop for gas and even clean the windshield. It wasn't rage. That would have meant I still had expectations. That night I didn't go home. I knew she wouldn't call. Not yet. Not until morning, when she'd assumed the sulking had run its course. That was always her word for it. Anytime I went quiet, I could be sitting in silence, processing something painful, or thinking about a serious career decision, or hell, just decompressing from a 12-hour workday, and she'd snap with, "Ugh, are you sulking again?" And she'd always say it with that same bored, self-congratulatory tone, like she was catching me in some childish act. Like silence was a flaw. Like quiet was weak. That Sunday, though, something shifted. It wasn't her words. It was the timing. The way she said it in front of people who never should have heard that. Friends I'd helped when their marriages crumbled. One of them I'd co-signed his damn car loan. And there they were, laughing at my expense like it was harmless fun. So I left. You know what's wild? Over 97% of people listen to stories like this and don't subscribe. And yet, those of you who do, you're the reason I kept building what came next. You're the reason this story exists. If you're still here, consider tapping that subscribe button. Keeps the team going and the stories flowing. Back to it. She didn't text that night. She figured she'd won again. Monday came, nothing. I wasn't on the couch. Not at the gym. Not in the garage. My car was gone. She probably expected a groveling text about how I just needed space. Or a dramatic apology followed by flowers. She loved the performance of reconciliation. She'd tell her friends how I came crawling back. They'd awe over how strong she was. Except none of that happened. Instead, she woke up to the house just slightly off. One of the shoes I always left by the door, gone. My jacket, the navy one she hated, gone. My toothbrush wasn't in the holder. My shaving kit wasn't in the drawer. She opened the fridge. The chocolate milk I bought every Sunday morning? Not there. Small things. Intentionally small. Just enough to nudge her brain. Still, she brushed it off. Probably muttered to herself, "Drama queen." By the second day, she called my office. They told her I'd taken a leave of absence. "How long?" she asked. No answer. I'd submitted the paperwork in advance, no return date. She checked the emergency card. Still untouched. No charges. No hotel stays. No gas stations. No plane tickets. Her first call was to my brother. He hadn't seen me. Then to her sister. Then to a mutual friend, who said, half laughing, "He's probably just teaching you a lesson." But by Thursday night, she logged into our joint account. My name was gone. She tried again. Different browser. Cleared cache. Still gone. Only her name now. And suddenly, the air in the room wasn't smug anymore. It was stale. Heavy. She checked the storage unit code. Denied. She logged into my Netflix. Denied. It was like I'd been peeled off every shared system with a scalpel. Friday morning, she called the police to file a welfare check. And even the officer sounded skeptical. "He's not answering, ma'am. But he's an adult. Unless there's proof of danger, we can't track someone just because they left." Danger? No, there wasn't danger. Just distance. Deliberate. Cold. Surgical. And she had no idea that the joke she made, that little line about me sulking, had already been archived. Time-stamped. Backed up in 3 formats. Not because I planned it all then, but because even before I vanished, I had a gut feeling she'd someday call that moment harmless. I wanted to make sure the world knew it wasn't. That wasn't the end. It wasn't even the beginning. It was just the point of fracture. The soundless snap. And when it all came crashing down around her months later, when lawyers started circling and partners ghosted and she begged someone, anyone, to explain what was happening, she'd think back to that Sunday afternoon, wine glass in hand, laughing in front of our friends, and realize that wasn't me sulking. That was me starting. Monday morning, she came downstairs expecting to hear the usual. The low hum of the coffee machine, his spoon clinking against the same mug he used every day, the faint rustle of the Wall Street Journal he never actually read, but always insisted on flipping through. But there was nothing. Just the smell of stale Pinot from last night and the lingering smugness of her joke still playing in her head like a rerun. The garage was open. His car was gone. She texted, "Where'd you go?" No reply. She tried calling once. Voicemail. She didn't leave a message. He'd call when he got over himself, she figured. That was his pattern, right? Quiet retreat, dramatic pause, then come back with tail tucked and some half-baked speech about respect. She rolled her eyes and left for work, barely noticing that his toothbrush still wasn't back in the holder. At the office, she got a call from HR, her own team, asking if she was okay. "Fine, why?" she asked. Apparently, someone had called her line twice and hung up. Unknown number. She didn't think much of it. Spam, probably. By noon, she was too buried in quarterly projections to care. But that night, something made her pause. Their Apple calendar was empty. Not just hers, there's the one they used for vet appointments, car maintenance, dinner with her parents. Blank. Not a single event. And her shared grocery list? Gone. Not erased, revoked. She wasn't the owner anymore. She opened his profile and stared at it for a long time. Status: inactive. Tuesday, she tried logging into their shared cloud storage. Wedding photos, gone. Tax folders, gone. A shared travel spreadsheet from years ago that she always teased him for obsessing over? Gone. Not deleted. Just no longer visible to her. She messaged him again. "Okay. Seriously?" Then again. "Is this some kind of statement?" Still nothing. By Wednesday, she was annoyed. Not worried, annoyed. She texted his brother. "Is he at your place?" The reply came a full 6 hours later. "Haven't heard from him in weeks." She checked with his office. The front desk said, "He's on approved leave." Until when? Didn't say. Then she tried his work email. Undeliverable. No forwarding address. His LinkedIn, deactivated. His Spotify account had gone quiet. She even checked the Ring doorbell history. He hadn't come back. Not once. She told herself he was playing some long, idiotic game. Testing boundaries. Maybe he booked some sad little cabin and was journaling about his feelings, trying to make her look like the villain. Classic. But then Thursday came and she tried calling his old gym. The guy at the desk said his membership had been canceled. Canceled, not paused. Something about that word, canceled, settled into her chest with a cold, slippery weight. She opened their joint checking account again. The history was intact. She scrolled, looking for the usual, gas station runs, fast food, Spotify charges, his usual Friday grocery haul. There was nothing. Not even a balance transfer. No final withdrawal. No, you take this, I'll take that. His name had just vanished. Not just removed. Unlinked. Like he'd never existed on that account to begin with. She refreshed the page. Still gone. By Friday, she stopped pretending it was a joke. She called the local hospitals. Quietly, like whispering the words made them less absurd. "I'm looking for someone. My husband. He's missing, I think." "How long has he been gone?" "Since Sunday, ma'am. Unless there's a reason to believe he's in danger." She gave them his name anyway. Full legal name, date of birth, blood type, allergies, anything to make it sound real. No matches. Not at the county ER, not at the 2 nearest urgent cares, not at the rehab center she suspected once during a rocky year. She waited until 3 a.m. before trying again. This time she called the morgue. They asked her to spell his name. She did. Slowly. Then again, faster, just in case she'd messed it up. The answer was the same. "No one by that name in our system." She hung up and stared at the ceiling fan. Her sister messaged her. "Still no word." She typed back, "Nothing. He's really milking this." But even as she hit send, her eyes drifted to the closet. Half empty. Shoes missing. His cologne wasn't on the shelf. And something else. Something she hadn't noticed yet was gnawing at her. It wasn't just the absence of things. It was how clean the absence felt. Like it wasn't abandonment. Like it was procedure. She thought hiring a private investigator would wrap things up neatly. A name, an address, maybe a grainy photo of him sulking in a roadside diner somewhere. A trail to follow, a confrontation to stage. Closure, at least. The guy she found came highly recommended, former cop. Now freelancing. Serious face, blunt voice, old-school yellow notepad instead of some slick iPad. She gave him everything. Full name, birthday, social security number, their last shared address, even an old passport scan she had stored from a trip they took to Montreal. She paid the retainer up front. Find him, she said. He's just being petty. 3 days later, the PI called. I got something. One withdrawal. She perked up. Where? Gas station ATM. Rural town. 3 hours northwest. When? The day after he left. 6:12 p.m. He emailed a blurry image from the ATM cam. It was definitely him. Baseball cap, backpack, head down. Nothing distinct, just enough to recognize the shape of his body, the way he always stood slightly uneven on his right foot from that old ankle injury. And then, nothing. No follow-up transactions. No hotel check-ins. No Uber or Lyft hits. No toll pass activity. No rental cars. His phone? Powered off within the same hour. Never turned back on. Bank cards untouched. Credit score frozen in time. No new lines opened. No flagged alerts. Not even an inquiry. I've seen people try to disappear, the PI said during their second meeting, flipping through his sparse notes. But this is different. It's not sloppy. It's not rushed. It's like he erased himself before he left. She snorted. He couldn't even figure out how to stop Outlook from sending junk to the archive folder. I don't think he's running, the investigator said flatly. I think he planned this. She wanted to laugh. She really did. But something about the way he said it, slow, deliberate, with no drama, left her stomach tight. He flipped to another page. Storage unit. Cancelled the week before. Cell plan. Switched to a prepaid burner 6 days prior. Used for a total of 4 calls. All within the same area. Then it went dead. Friends. Not a single one reports hearing from him. Even the ones who owed him money. Family? Same. One brother said he assumed it was a fallout between you two and didn't want to interfere. Parents are both gone. Right? She nodded slowly. Nothing ties him to anyone. Not anymore. She stared at the notepad. The PI kept scratching notes. Names. Numbers. Dead ends. Could he have changed his name? Legally, there'd be a record. Illegally? Maybe. But he'd need help for that. From who? He shrugged. That's what I don't get. He doesn't seem connected. Not the kind of guy with a plan B and a network of burner phones. But everything about this says he became that guy. She shifted in her chair. So what now? I keep looking. But I'm telling you now, this is rare. Most people panic, make mistakes, leave trails. He didn't. The call ended with no promises. She stood in her kitchen, staring at the blurry printout of that ATM still. It was so ordinary, so painfully dull. A man in a cap pulling $60. But she knew him. She knew he hated carrying cash. He always paid with his card, even for gum. Cash is for drug dealers and magicians, he used to say. So why $60? Why that day? She opened a map. The town was small, really small. Population under 5,000. No reason to go there. No connection, no relatives, no friends. But that wasn't what got her. What got her was how clean the vanishing act really was. No dramatic goodbye. No teary last-minute call. No angry texts, no slamming doors. Just absence. Precision. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the dark, trying to think of every conversation they'd ever had that might have hinted at something like this. Some fantasy of escape. A comment about fake identities or just walking away. But there was nothing. Just memories of Sunday grocery runs, quiet dinners, stupid fights about thermostat settings. A life that didn't seem to have cracks, until he disappeared through one. By morning, she had a theory. He was alive. Not just alive, but waiting. Somewhere watching. Not out of spite. Not out of fear. But because he had a purpose. And the terrifying part? She had no idea what it was. By month 4, she'd mastered the art of the sympathetic smile. Oh yeah, we're separated. Always with that vague pause after yeah. Like she wasn't sure how much to share. Like maybe he was sick, or going through something tragic. People filled in the blanks for her. That's the thing about silence. It makes others so eager to explain it for you. The office whispered about a breakdown. Some said he'd joined a cult. One intern swore he was hiding in Canada. Off the grid. She let them wonder. It helped. The truth was, she had no damn idea where he was. But she had a story. and she repeated it enough to start believing it. He just snapped. Emotionally unstable. Couldn't handle me doing well. Probably needed to find himself or whatever. Add air quotes. Look exhausted. Take a slow sip of coffee. The script wrote itself. She moved out of their place, not immediately, of course. At first, she stayed, convinced he'd come back to his senses. But the bed felt emptier every week, and every item he'd taken. His books, his tools, his old leather boots, felt less like a tantrum and more like a deliberate removal. So she got a new apartment. Sleek, downtown, exposed brick, stainless steel, skyline views. The kind of place she used to say was impractical when they toured rentals together. She signed the lease in her own name, poured herself a glass of overpriced wine, and toasted to finally putting myself first. Her friends cheered her on. They always preferred her single, truth be told. Brunches were easier. No need to check with him. And now that she wasn't waiting around for Sulky Sam, as her best friend called him, she was a hit at every mixer, every networking event. She glowed, they said. She was promoted within 6 months. Started dating again. Nothing serious. Just light, clean distractions. Men who complimented her resume and didn't question her past. She told them she was divorced, or almost divorced. The specifics changed depending on the wine. But no one dug deep because no one ever really wanted the full story, especially when it came with high heels and high income. And yet, one thing refused to fade with the rest. The old house. They bought it 7 years ago. 2 stories. Corner lot. Stone porch she always meant to decorate better. She hadn't been back since moving out, but every so often, curiosity clawed at her. She'd drive past after meetings, park a block away, peer from behind sunglasses. Same curtains, same mailbox, same dead porch light, but not abandoned. The lawn was mowed, the hedges trimmed, garbage bins placed perfectly on collection day, like someone somewhere was maintaining it. She checked the property records online. Her name was still there. So was his. In fact, nothing had changed. No transfer of title. No new mortgage filings. No liens, no sale. Just sitting, untouched, like a chess piece waiting to be played. She called the city, pretending to be a curious buyer. I was just wondering if the owners planned to sell? The clerk checked. No plans on file. She hung up, stomach twisting. If he'd vanished, truly vanished, wouldn't he have sold the house? Taken the equity? Burned the bridge? Even a crazy person would want the cash. So what was he doing? What was he waiting for? And that's when the dreams started. Not nightmares, just static. Foggy scenes where he stood in the doorway watching. Not angry, not sad, just watching. Like he knew something she didn't. Like he was letting her go through the motions of moving on while he waited. For what? She tried reaching out once. Called his brother again. Asked if anything had changed. He'll show up, was all he said. But how can you be so sure? Because he doesn't do things halfway. She tried not to overthink it. But whenever she signed a contract or swiped her card or told another man she was free, his name still echoed, quiet but unmoved. It was still on the deed. Still in the records. Still there. It started with a beige envelope. No logo. Just her name, typed cleanly in black ink, with a return address she didn't recognize. She opened it while half listening to a strategy call, thinking it was another credit card offer or maybe a survey from her building's HOA. Inside, a formal request from a financial institution she'd never dealt with, Halberton Equity Services. The letter was worded politely enough, but with the kind of sterile precision that makes your chest tighten. It asked for clarification on disclosures and capital changes made during Q2 of the prior fiscal year, and whether Mr. Reynolds, her former spouse, had full knowledge of the adjustments made to their joint assets. She blinked. Former spouse? They weren't even divorced. Hell, they weren't even legally separated. She never filed anything. How did they know anything had changed? She tossed it aside. Probably a mix-up. Junk. 2 days later, a second envelope arrived. Same formatting. Different sender. This one was from a tax firm in New York, Langsford and Rowe. The letter was short, cold, and curious. Requesting verification of earnings and asset reporting from 3 calendar years ago, particularly focused on any trusts, subsidiaries, or personal guarantees she might have signed during the period of her husband's unavailability. Unavailability. Not disappearance. Not absence. Unavailability. She brought the stack to her lawyer, Joanna, someone she'd kept on retainer more for show than need. Joanna skimmed through it with a furrowed brow that deepened as she flipped each page. These aren't spam. These are discovery tactics. Discovery for what? We're not in litigation. Joanna tapped her pen. You sure about that? The third envelope arrived before the end of the week. This time it wasn't a request. It was a subpoena, issued from a court in another state, one she hadn't set foot in since college. The attached documentation listed her full name, several of her LLCs, and a firm she'd worked with briefly during a contract acquisition the year after he vanished. The subpoena demanded financial records, detailed ones, breakdown of capital flow, amendments to corporate bylaws, and, again, that same sentence. Was Mr. Reynolds aware of your restructuring? She stared at the paper, mouth dry. The fourth letter came with a post-it from Joanna. Call me. Now. The letter itself was an interrogatory, an official list of questions, this time from an arbitration committee. It referenced discrepancies between her financial statements and newly surfaced documentation tied to, of all things, a silent partner clause. That phrase haunted her the rest of the day. Silent partner? She hadn't even known the meaning of that term until recently. And now here it was again, repeating, echoing. She finally called Joanna. I need answers. Joanna exhaled slowly. These firms, Halberton, Langsford, they're real. They're boutique, private, and they don't move unless they're being paid very well. By who? Joanna was quiet. Then, we traced the return address on the subpoena. It's a serviced mailbox. So, a fake? No. Legitimate. And paid for under a corporate account. One that lists as inactive, but shows up on offshore registration rolls. That's not possible. It gets better, Joanna said, her tone dry. The name on the offshore record? Don't say it. Joanna didn't. But she didn't need to. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it over the silence. I thought he was gone, she said, voice cracking. Apparently not. And apparently not stupid either. That night, she pulled up every document she could find from the year he vanished. Her investment agreements, her side projects, her venture partnerships, all of it. She didn't tell Joanna, but there were shortcuts she'd taken. Minor ones. Harmless back then. Overlapping disclosures. Paperwork timed to exploit a loophole she thought no one would catch. The kind of thing executives do when they know the people around them won't look too hard. But someone was looking, with surgical precision. And somehow, every little shadow she'd cast during that year was being exposed under a microscope. She tossed aside another envelope. Another firm. Another variation of the same question. Did he know? Did he approve? Was he informed? He hadn't touched a bank account. Hadn't updated his license. Hadn't made a peep in nearly a year. And yet, someone was pulling her financial thread from the other end. She logged into her private equity portal. A fund she'd invested in quietly through a holding entity was now flagged. Compliance review pending. She called the fund manager in a panic. It's just a procedural hiccup, he assured her. A new limited partner submitted an inquiry, and it triggered a standard audit. Who? Can't say. NDA. But they're thorough. She hung up. The house, the name on the deed, the silence. None of it had been dormant. It had been dormant on purpose. She wasn't being ghosted. She was being watched. The name appeared almost like a glitch, buried deep in a footnote of a compliance request from a partner she barely remembered signing with. A clause referencing external due diligence conducted by Iron Bridge Holdings, Limited. It sounded innocuous enough, standard vetting language. Except she'd never heard of them. Not once. And she prided herself on knowing every firm that touched her paperwork. Especially offshore ones. Do a search, she told Joanna. That was Monday. By Thursday, her legal team was silent, and then concerned. No website. No public-facing portfolio. No press releases. No board member bios. No recent transactions. Just a company registry entry in a remote Caribbean jurisdiction. Iron Bridge Holdings, Limited, formed on a Tuesday. No phone number. No listed headquarters. All mail forwarded through a shell address in Luxembourg. This doesn't make sense, Joanna muttered during their call. Flipping pages. They're listed as minority observers on 2 of your past partnerships, your media buyout 3 years ago, and the wellness fund that collapsed during COVID. She froze. That's not possible. They're there. Silent class. Not voting. But they were copied on internal audit logs. Which means they had access to my filings. Joanna didn't reply. What else? She demanded. Joanna sighed. There's one more link. She waited. Your patent licensing deal, the one that fell through last year because of the compliance hold? What about it? Iron Bridge Holdings submitted the review that triggered the hold. Their analysts flagged a potential conflict between your entity and, well, your previous marital status. That's impossible. That deal had nothing to do with. I know, but they flagged it. That's why it stalled. Her skin went cold. And then Joanna added one last thing. The original incorporation of Iron Bridge Holdings? It was time-stamped 72 hours after he disappeared. The air in her condo went still. She stood there, barefoot on the cold tile, heart thudding loud enough to drown out the city noise below. She opened her laptop, reread the LLC filing with shaking fingers. The name of the registered agent was generic, the usual placeholder corporations used when someone wanted to stay invisible. But there was one field, one that hadn't been redacted yet by some oversight, the initial fund deposit. It was modest, quiet, just under $9,000. And the source? A personal account belonging to someone named B. Reynolds. Her throat dried. It was like staring into a shadow she'd forgotten to fear. Joanna texted her 15 minutes later. Just pulled Iron Bridge's old email signature from a cached thread. Check this. She opened the image. It wasn't his name. Of course not. But it was his quote. A line he used to mutter when he was tired of arguing. Silence is the only answer they can't interrupt. She dropped the phone. What was this? Some long con? A vendetta? But he wasn't built for that. She used to joke he couldn't even organize his sock drawer without a meltdown. He was decent at taxes, sure, and obsessive about details, but he was no architect. No strategist. At least, that's what she'd told herself. Until now. Her next board meeting was postponed due to a last-minute conflict. An undisclosed concern from a minority investor flagged under a regulatory review. The name was redacted. But she knew. She knew. At night, she began checking every contract she'd ever signed. Not for loopholes, but for shadows. For lines she didn't remember. Names she hadn't noticed. She started highlighting phrases like observer rights and minority claimants and third-party silent review. Legal ghosts. Specters of someone who had vanished but somehow tightened the leash around her world with every step she took forward. Even her husband, her new one, who had no idea how deep this web went, started asking questions. What's going on with the permits? Why is the deal still stalled? Why are our accounts under review? She didn't answer, because the truth made her sound paranoid. But paranoia requires doubt. This wasn't doubt. This was certainty. He wasn't gone. He was watching. He wasn't sulking. He was calculating. An iron bridge? It wasn't a hiding place. It was a control panel. He didn't usually ask for in-person meetings. Not anymore. Everything had gone remote, paperless, sanitized. If her lawyer, Alan Greaves, a 62-year-old man who hadn't worn socks that matched in 5 years, was asking her to meet face-to-face, something was either legally on fire or about to be. She arrived at his office expecting the usual jargon, maybe a new tax wrinkle tied to Iron Bridge, or some random compliance form that needed retroactive signatures. She even rehearsed a few flippant lines in the elevator. What now? Did he trademark my name? But when she stepped inside, Alan didn't smirk. He didn't even speak. He just gestured to the table. A manila folder waited there like a loaded gun. Sit, he said, voice dry. She did. He opened the folder. And there it was, that document. Their prenup. She almost laughed. Seriously? This again? We signed that a decade ago, before I made any real money. He didn't laugh. He pulled out the third page and laid it flat in front of her. Section 9C, he said, and pointed with one finger. She blinked. She didn't remember Section 9C. In fact, she was fairly certain the original version didn't have a Section 9C. She remembered the first draft, there were only 8 sections. She had skimmed it while sipping Chardonnay in her robe. Had her assistant print it out. She'd highlighted the parts about individual ownership and split liabilities in orange, then emailed it back to Alan with a breezy "looks fine. Let's just get this done." Alan slid a second sheet forward, annotated, time-stamped, and signed. Turns out there was an addendum, quietly folded into the final draft. Your initials are here. See? Her heart stuttered. What does it say? In the event of total abandonment by either party, specifically defined as prolonged unexplained absence exceeding 90 days, Asset Review Authority reverts to the designated silent partner named in Appendix C. He paused. She stared. Appendix C? Alan reached into the folder again and pulled out one more sheet. Thin. Minimal. Just a single line of text typed in 12-point Times New Roman. Appendix C. Iron Bridge Holdings, Limited. Her fingers curled into fists before she realized it. That wasn't in the draft I read. Alan raised an eyebrow. You initialed this version. I didn't read every line. I know. He sat down across from her and let the silence stretch. Then, this clause was activated 91 days after he vanished. We missed it at the time because the trigger wasn't automatic. It required notice. And it turns out he filed that notice. Privately, through a third-party legal intermediary, to a trust you never knew existed. 2 months ago. She stared at the signature line. Her own handwriting rushed, lazy, looped. His signature clean, centered, deliberate. This wasn't real, she muttered. This wasn't part of the deal. I would have never agreed to let some entity take control of anything. Alan didn't answer. He simply folded the sheet back and set it gently in the folder, like he was tucking in a corpse. He couldn't have known, she said, shaking her head. He wasn't smart enough to plan this. Alan leaned back, crossed his arms, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw something close to pity in his eyes. He knew. She tried to speak. Couldn't. He tapped the folder once. This wasn't revenge. This was structure. Legal, strategic, and airtight. He gave you rope. You pulled. Her mind spiraled through every move she'd made since his disappearance. The silent power grabs. The money moved through gray area channels. The restructuring. The LLC splits. She thought she was cleaning house, taking control. Building without friction. The absence of resistance felt like a gift. Now she saw it for what it really was. A decoy. He let her feel powerful. Let her make decisions. Let her document them. Then let the clock run. And the claws snapped shut like a steel trap. She had handed over asset review to a ghost. To a silent partner tied to a man she couldn't find, couldn't contact, and worse, couldn't predict. I need to challenge it, she said, her voice hoarse. Alan tilted his head. With what? The court won't argue procedural consent. You signed. You executed. You activated the clause by your own behavior. She stood up too fast, knocked over her chair, pacing. How is this even enforceable? I didn't know what I was signing. Alan shrugged. He counted on that. She spun to face him. Why didn't you catch it? I sent you 2 reminders. You told me not to over-lawyer the romance. Silence. She remembered saying that. She remembered laughing when she did. But it didn't feel funny now. Now it felt like the hinge point of her collapse. Section 9C. Iron Bridge Holdings. His name nowhere. His voice nowhere. His presence nowhere. And yet here he was, sitting at the table through a clause she never saw coming. She thought silence was weakness. She was wrong. The first domino fell with barely a whisper. A polite email from her building's management company. Due to administrative changes in ownership structure, we are updating the leaseholder information. She was listed as a resident, not an owner. Confused, she contacted them. The building manager forwarded her to the trust's appointed administrator. A trust? Yes, they said very calmly. The unit had been placed into a private property trust several months ago. Retroactively, a sealed agreement she herself had signed during a restructuring period. They even attached the scan document. Her signature, notarized, dated 4 days after his disappearance. She didn't remember signing it. And yet, there it was. She thought it was some kind of tax shelter recommendation from her financial planner. She'd signed dozens of forms that month. Blurred lines between her private accounts and business filings. It had all felt so abstract until now. She tried calling the trust's number. Disconnected. She reached out to her accountant. He didn't return her call. She sent 3 angry emails to Alan. The reply came an hour later. It's getting worse, he wrote. You need to check your stock options. Immediately, she logged in. Access denied. A red banner. Restricted due to compliance flags. Please contact the Corporate Ethics Board. It didn't make sense. These were her shares, early-stage equity in companies she helped build. But each portal told the same story. Flag after flag. Documentation under review. Unresolved conflicts of interest pending. Pending what? She opened her mailbox and found 3 more letters. One was from the patent office, her patent office, where she had filed a unique proprietary blend for a wellness product. The product had just gone viral last quarter. But now the patent was being challenged. Not by a competitor, not by a random troll, by a holding firm claiming prior silent stake via early-stage contributions, sourced through affiliated trust assets. The name of the holding firm? Iron Bridge. Of course. She burst into Joanna's office that afternoon without knocking. Joanna was already on the phone, holding up a finger to shush her. Yes, I understand the arbitration clause, Joanna said slowly into the phone. But my client was not aware. She paused, looked up at her, then added quietly, "That's correct." She signed, but she was not aware. The call ended. Joanna looked 10 years older. He's bleeding you with paper. What? He's not just hitting your assets. He's targeting everything you built. One by one, Joanna spread out the printouts on her desk. Red circles, arrows, strings connecting subsidiaries to entities to trusts. It looked like a conspiracy wall. Except this wasn't a theory. This was already happening. You see this? Joanna tapped a section. This is a grantor trust he registered through a legal proxy 6 years ago. You commingled assets through a joint fund that year tax sheltering under his name. When you restructured your portfolio, you triggered compliance reviews. They linked back here. And now they're being weaponized. Can't we fight it? Joanna didn't answer. That night, her phone rang. It was her new husband, soon-to-be ex. Are you dragging me into something? He said. No hello. No warmth. What are you talking about? My bank just froze one of our joint accounts. Said there's an active lien from a foreign entity. Iron Bridge or something. What the hell is that? She couldn't speak. I talked to a lawyer. He says if I don't separate my assets immediately, I could be liable for your past financial misconduct. I didn't do anything illegal. I didn't say illegal. I said contaminated. That's what they're calling it. Contaminated funds. He filed for annulment the next day. Didn't even wait for breakfast. Her friends stopped calling. Investors ghosted her. One startup removed her from the advisory board without a vote. We believe your current situation is not aligned with our ethics policy. Their email read. She reached out to Iron Bridge. Twice. The first email bounced. The second returned with a polite auto-response. Thank you for your inquiry. This mailbox is no longer monitored. No explanation. No number. No voice. Just silence. The kind of silence that sounded like strategy. She wasn't drowning in scandal. There were no headlines, no tweets, no exposés. Just static. Every faucet of her world slowly tightening. Quiet. Clinical. Unstoppable. She checked her credit one night on a whim. One of her cards had been closed. She hadn't even received a notice. The account had been marked dormant, with external concerns pending. She slammed the laptop shut and screamed. But even her own rage sounded like an echo now. She finally understood. She wasn't losing. She was being unwritten. It arrived like all endings do, without ceremony, without sound. Just a white envelope slid under her office door sometime between the catered lunch and the PR call she didn't finish. No logo. No return address. Just her name. Centered. All caps. No title. She stood there staring at it for a long moment, half expecting it to be another anonymous demand. Another reminder of something she'd supposedly authorized. But this one felt different. Heavier. Colder. She opened it with a letter opener. Her hand steady, her breath not. Inside, a single-page notice on premium weight paper. Arbitration notice. The phrasing was so cold it almost burned. Formal initiation of fiduciary review proceedings under Clause 9C. Breach of marital asset alignment. Silent manipulation of spousal contributions. Intentional concealment of financial reallocation. Authority granted via dormant clause enforcement. Effective immediately. Her name. His name. The date of marriage. Date of disappearance. Date of asset divergence. Everything was laid out. No embellishments. No accusations. Just evidence. Attached. A sheet of screenshots. Digital captures, each one timestamped, location tagged, and rendered in 4K clarity. The first was a chat log from her group message with her sister and 2 friends. She was holding a wine glass, laughing, face flushed. Underneath, her own words, glowing blue in the bubble. He's sulking like a child. Honestly, I should have started locking the liquor cabinet. Timestamp. The day after he vanished. Another screenshot, her email, Forwarded to her assistant. Split the shares before anyone pokes around. He's MIA. That's on him. The email had been archived, deleted, buried. But somehow he had it. And the last image, one she didn't even remember sending, was a meme. A cartoon of a man crying into a pile of money with the caption, "When your fragile ego can't handle your wife being the breadwinner." She dropped the papers. They scattered like dry leaves. There was no threat in the envelope. No insult. No plea. Just facts. Documented. Sequenced. Weaponized. She ran. Literally ran. To Alan's office, half out of breath, her hair wild, coat swinging off one shoulder like she'd been mugged. She burst through his door and slammed the letter on his desk. "Fight it," she said. "We fight all of it. Arbitration. Clause. Whatever this sick little shell company is. Fight it." Alan read it all in silence. When he was done, he leaned back and looked at her. Not like a lawyer. Like someone watching the exact moment a dam fails. "I can't," he said softly. Her heart skipped. "What do you mean you can't? This isn't litigation. This isn't court. This is arbitration. Private, binding, and sealed. You signed the prenup. You activated Clause 9C. And now you're under review. Not as an ex-spouse, but as a former partner with documented malfeasance. You're saying I deserve this? I'm saying you're not going to win." She laughed. A bitter, hollow thing. "So that's it? He just wins because he vanished and played dead for a year? That's justice." Alan didn't move. "This isn't about justice. This is about structure. About a man who understood what silence buys when you invest in it long enough." She stared at him, speechless. "Do you know what I would have said if you brought this to me 2 years ago?" he asked, tapping the prenup with one finger. "I would have told you to read slower, to stop assuming power makes you immune to consequence, to stop thinking silence meant surrender." He slid the arbitration notice back toward her. "But you didn't bring it to me. You brought it to him." She left his office in a daze. Outside, the city buzzed. Indifferent. People with coffees and earbuds and lives untouched by slow-motion ruin. She tried calling her new husband, then remembered he wasn't her husband anymore. Tried calling Joanna, then realized she'd fired her in a panic 2 weeks ago. She was alone. Not because of scandal. Not because of exposure. Because someone had watched her long enough to learn her rhythm. Then waited. And when the moment came, he didn't scream. He didn't sue. He didn't even raise his voice. He let her own words be the blade. She thought he sulked. She thought he ran. She thought he was gone. But all he'd done was prepare. She arrived early, thinking it would give her an edge. She wore her sharpest suit. Dark gray. Power cut. The one she used to wear during acquisition talks when she needed to seem unshakable. But her hands betrayed her. Sweating. She had rehearsed a speech. Even printed it. Tucked it into a leather folder she kept clutched in both palms like it might deflect what was coming. The arbitration room was plain. 3 chairs. Frosted glass. Pitcher of water. Untouched. No cameras. No witnesses. Just the appointed arbitrator, an assistant taking notes, and across from her, nothing. No screen. No video call. No legal rep for him. Only a slim manila folder with her name on the label. "Ms. Reynolds," the arbitrator said, not looking up. "We'll begin." She opened her folder, cleared her throat. But before she could speak, the assistant handed her a stapled document. 15 pages. She scanned the first line and froze. Every asset transfer she'd made since his disappearance. Every LLC formed, every IP reassignment, every fund restructured. Not just listed, annotated. Dates, motivations, risk rankings. Beside each, a notation in a different font, listing her justification in her own words. Email quotes, board notes, Slack messages. "He's not here. I don't need permission. Split this quietly. It's all mine anyway. He disappeared. That's on him." The next section contained screenshots. Not just the ones she'd seen, more. Old chats. Snippets from a business retreat. A voice-to-text transcription from a private call she'd made walking through a parking garage, venting about him. They documented everything. All of it. Quietly. Thoroughly. Coldly. She raised her head, throat tightening. "Where is his attorney?" The arbitrator didn't blink. This was filed pro se. No representation. She frowned. "He's representing himself?" "No," the arbitrator said. "He has no interest in defense. Just execution. Took 11 minutes. 11 minutes for the arbitrator to rule in favor of the structured review. To uphold Clause 9C. To approve the redirection of assets under dormant trust protocols. 11 minutes for 7 years of climb, posturing, and curated persona to be swept into a silent, legal drain she never saw being built beneath her. When it ended, the assistant stood and placed a sealed envelope in front of her. Per request. Statement from Mr. Reynolds. She didn't want to open it, but her hand moved anyway. Inside one line neatly typed. I sulked in silence, until silence became leverage. Nothing else. No signature. Not even a date. She stared at it for a long time, waiting for rage to rise. Or shame. Or clarity. But what came was worse. Nothing. Because the story was over. There would be no trial. No media blow-up. No revenge arc with fire and fury. Just absence. Precision. A structure she never noticed being built behind her as she mocked its architect in public. She stood. Walked out of the room like a shadow of herself. The world outside didn't care. The sun was too bright. The air too warm. Everything continued as if she hadn't just been hollowed out from the inside. She stopped at a corner coffee shop. Fumbled for her card. Declined. She tried another. Declined. Pulled out her phone, fingers shaking. Bank app. Access revoked. All accounts closed. Holdings transferred. Secondary authorizations expired. Gone. Not seized. Not stolen. Just gone. Her past still existed, but it no longer belonged to her. A soft chime rang behind her as someone else walked into the cafe. She didn't turn around. She didn't speak. Because suddenly, she understood. Silence isn't passive. Silence is design. And he had used hers as the blueprint for her collapse.